Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. And also, the Search for the Ancient Bauble Kickstarter has launched, so make sure you go check that out. The Kickstarter campaign will last for 30 days, and after that, the playmat will no longer be available for purchase. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Core studio. Welcome to the show. So today's episode comes to you courtesy of Seth, who's been supporting this channel as a general tier patron. I truly couldn't do this without the support from amazing patrons like Seth, so again, Seth, thank you so much. And for the personalized deck tech, Seth chose Extus Oriq Overlord with a focus on Aristocrats. Extus is a 2/4 human warlock with double strike that costs 1 white, black, black. And he has Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, return target non-legendary creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Now, Extus is actually an MDFC commander, and on the backside we've got Awaken the Blood Avatar. It's a sorcery for 6 black red, and it says at initial cost to cast this spell, you may sacrifice any number of creatures. This spell costs 2 less to cast for each creature sacrificed this way. Each opponent sacrifices a creature, create a 3/6 black and red avatar creature token with haste, and whenever this creature attacks, it deals 3 damage to each opponent. So this backside can be incredibly powerful, and in an Aristocrat style build, we can utilize this as a sacrifice outlet if we need to. But again, with this deck tech, we're going to focus heavily on Extus with an Aristocrat style strategy. And Extus is a fantastic Aristocrat style commander. Essentially, anytime we cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, we also get to recur a creature from our graveyard. That is a ton of value, especially when we're set up correctly. Essentially, we can get creatures out, we can sacrifice them for a ton of value, we get them back in our hand, we recast them, we sacrifice them again, and you see where this is going. And Mardu is definitely a fantastic color combination when it comes to Aristocrats. So what kind of crazy things can we do with a deck like this? Well, let's jump into it. First up, let's talk about some fantastic creature fodder, starting off with cards like Doom Traveler, Garrison Cat, and Hunted Witness. Doom Traveler says when it dies, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. And then when Garrison Cat dies, we get a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. And when Hunted Witness dies, we get a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. So each of these creatures only costs 1 mana, yet we get 2 bodies out of them. And again, in an Aristocrat style deck where we're looking to sacrifice a lot of creatures for a ton of value, that is huge. Next up though, let's talk about some creatures that can make us even more tokens with Mogwar Marshal, Chittering Witch, and Young Pyromancer. Mogwar Marshal only costs 1 in a red, and it has when it enters the battlefield or dies, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token, and it's got an echo cost for 1 in a red. Now, usually an echo cost is a downside, but in this case, it's pretty much an upside. Because essentially for just 2 mana with Mogwar Marshal, we are getting 3 bodies in total. And again, in this kind of a deck, that is a ton of value. And again, with this kind of a commander, it's recurable value. And then there's Chittering Witch, which says when it enters the battlefield, create a number of 1/1 black rat creature tokens equal to the number of opponents you have. So typically in a game of commander, we're going to be getting 3 of these. And then by paying 1 in a black, we can sacrifice a creature, and target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. So this is a fantastic token producer that can also act as a sacrifice outlet for us. And then we've got yet another way to take advantage of the instants and sorceries we're going to be casting in this deck with Young Pyromancer. It says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/1 red elemental creature token. So this can make us a lot of tokens throughout the game, and again, that's a ton of value in Aristocrat style strategy. Now, of course, on top of these creatures that make tokens, we've also got some spells that can make tokens as well. For example, we've got Dragon Fodder, which makes 2 goblins, Raise the Alarm, which makes 2 soldiers, and Gather the Townsfolk, which makes 2 humans. And with Gather the Townsfolk, if we happen to have 5 or less life, we get 5 of those tokens instead. Regardless, each of these are very efficient token makers, and again, on top of that, when we cast them, we get a trigger from our commander. So we can recur a lovely non-legendary creature, and the fun times continue. But we're also going to be running some mass token producers as well, like Call the Coppercoats and Rise the Dreadmarn. Call the Coppercoats has Strive. This spell costs 1 in white more to cast for each target beyond the first. Choose any number of target opponents, create X 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, where X is the number of creatures those opponents control. So yeah, if another player is playing a go-wide strategy, congratulations, we get an absurd number of humans. And again, if we cast it for its Strive cost, we can get even more. And then Rise of the Dreadmarn is a fantastic foretell spell. It says create X 2/2 Black Zombie Berserker creature tokens for X the number of non-token creatures that died this turn. So yeah, first off, this can be a fantastic response to a board wipe, pretty much immediately building back up our board. Or it can just be another fantastic benefit for sacrificing a lot of non-token creatures in a turn. But you know what? We can also utilize our opponent's creatures to help us out as well with something like Mass Mutiny. It says for each opponent, gain control of up to one target creature that player controls until end of turn, untap those creatures that gain haste until end of turn. So we take one of each of their creatures, we maybe attack with them, and then we definitely sacrifice them for a lot of value. Now, how exactly do we go about sacrificing all these creatures though? First up, let's talk about some fantastic creature-based sacrifice outlets with the Saraseer and Woe Strider. Each of these have sacrifice a creature, scry 1. So again, free sacrifice outlets are always going to be more impactful than ones that actually cost mana. We can utilize them whenever we want and as many times as we need to. And while scrying isn't technically card advantage, it is card selection, so it can help us get rid of dead cards off the top of our library. Now on top of being a sacrifice outlet, Woe Strider also can make us a 0/1 goat, which is just lovely. And on top of that, we can actually get this back by escaping it. But we've also got some sacrifice outlet creatures that are really hard to deal with, starting with Dimir Houseguard. It says sacrifice a creature, regenerate Dimir Houseguard, and it's got transmute for 1 black. So again, this is a sacrifice outlet that protects itself, and on top of that, it can be a fantastic tutor as well. By paying that transmute cost, we can discard this card and search our library for a card with the same converted mana cost as it, reveal it and put it into our hand, then shuffle our library, play only as a sorcery. Basically, it's an almost uncounterable tutor for 3 mana that gets us something that costs 4. And there are a ton of great cards in this deck that cost 4. Such as Immerstrom Predator and Falkenrath Aristocrat, which are both incredibly difficult outlets to deal with. Immerstrom Predator says whenever it becomes tapped, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard and put a +1/+1 counter on Immerstrom Predator. On top of that, sacrifice another creature, it gains indestructible until end of turn, tap it. And then Falkenrath Aristocrat has flying and haste, and sacrifice a creature, it gains indestructible until end of turn. If the sacrifice creature was human, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So yeah, each of these are evasive, can get larger throughout the game, and also protect themselves while letting us sacrifice things for free. Pretty fantastic cards for this kind of a deck. Next up, let's talk about some spells that can help us sacrifice creatures as well with Village Rites and Plumb the Forbidden. Village Rites has to sacrifice 1 creature to draw 2 cards. Again, sacrificing a creature is absolutely no big deal in this deck, and in fact, it's something that we want to do. And again, thanks to our commander, not only does this draw us 2 cards, but it's also going to help us recur a creature as well. But then there's Plumb the Forbidden, which does this in an even bigger way. It says, as neutral cost to cast this spell, you may sacrifice 1 or more creatures. When you do, copy this spell for each creature sacrificed this way, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. So this can help us sacrifice a ton of creatures to draw a lot of cards. And again, because of our commander's Magecraft trigger, it triggers not only on the cast spell, but also on the copies. So we sacrifice a ton of creatures, draw a ton of cards, and get a lot of creatures back from our graveyard. Yeah, that's a lot of value, and it's going to be well worth any life loss with this. And speaking of drawing cards, we can also draw an absurd number of cards with cards like Smothering Abomination, Grim Haruspex, and Midnight Reaper. Smothering Abomination says at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature, and whenever you sacrifice a creature, draw a card. Again, sacrificing creatures is something that this deck already wants to do, so have fun. And then Grim Haruspex says whenever another non-token creature you control dies, draw a card. Midnight Reaper is somewhat similar. It says whenever a non-token creature you control dies, Midnight Reaper deals 1 damage to you and you draw a card. So again, this is going to cost us some life, but drawing cards is going to be well worth it for that. 1 life for 1 card is a deal in Commander that I will take every day of the week. But in this deck, these are definitely not the only kinds of benefits that we get when our creatures die. So next up, let's talk about some cards like Anax Hardened in the Forge, Sifter of Skulls, and Requiem Angel. Anax says whenever it or another non-token creature you control dies, create a 1/1 red satyr creature token with. This creature can't block. If the creature had power 4 or greater, create 2 of those tokens instead. So essentially now when any of our non-token creatures die, they get replaced. And if it was a big creature with power 4 or greater, well, they get replaced twice. And then Sifter of Skulls is somewhat similar. It says whenever another non-token creature you control dies, put a 1/1 colorless Eldrazi sign creature token onto the battlefield. It has sacrifice this creature, add colors to your mana pool. So the tokens that this one makes, we can actually sacrifice for some temporary ramp. And then Requiem Angel says whenever another non-spirit creature token you control dies, put a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying onto the battlefield. So this one actually doesn't care if it's a token or non-token creature, it just cares if it's a spirit or not. So because of that, a lot of our tokens are going to apply. Now, as good as these token makers are, there's one in my opinion that stands above the rest. And that would be the golden pick of this deck, which is the #1 card out of our 99. And the golden pick for this deck is Ogre Slumlord. Ogre Slumlord is a 3/3 Ogre Rogue that costs 3 black. It says whenever another non-token creature dies, you may create a 1/1 black rat creature token, and rats you control have Death Touch. This token maker is fantastic, because not only does it count when our non-token creatures die, but it also counts whenever any of our opponent's creatures die too. So this can make us an absurd number of creature tokens that we can then sacrifice for even more value. Or, we can heavily utilize them in combat because they also have Death Touch. So they make fantastic blockers, and it's really difficult for our opponents to block them as well, because if they do, their creature's gonna die, and then we're gonna get another red, so why block them at all? Regardless, the amount of value that Ogre Slumlord can generate us throughout the game is absolutely absurd, and that's why it's the Golden Pig. Now, when it comes to actually finishing our opponents off, of course we can do it through combat after we make a lot of tokens, but an easier way is to, just sacrifice them and drain our opponents out. So, of course, things like Zulaport Cutthroat, Cruel Celebrant, and Sir Conrad are fantastic in this kind of a deck. Zulaport Cutthroat says whenever it or another creature we control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and we gain 1 life. Cruel Celebrant says whenever it or another creature or planeswalker you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Regardless, once we're set up, each of these can drain our opponents out in absolutely no time. And then Sir Conrad can be even more brutal. It says whenever another creature dies or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad the Grim deals 1 damage to each opponent. And on top of that, we can pay 1 and a black to mill a card. Essentially, Sir Conrad punishes all of our opponents for any creature going anywhere. And again, keep in mind that with our commander's Magecraft trigger, we're going to be having a lot of creatures leave our graveyard, and yeah, he pings for that too. Or, of course, a fantastic way to finish off all of our opponents is by casting Gary a lot. Grey Merchant of Asphodel, better known as Gary, is a fantastic finisher. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent's going to lose X life or X our devotion to black, and then we gain life equal to life lost this way. So we cast Gary, then we use an outlet to sacrifice Gary, then we cast an instant sorcery spell and we get Gary back to our hand. Then when we've got the mana for it, we do it again, and again, and again. Again, with enough devotion on the field, it's not going to take long at all to drain out all of our opponents, especially with all the other ways that we have to punish them and drain them in this deck. So yeah, there's a lot of powerful things that you can do with a deck like this. But now it's time for me to wrap this episode up and give you my final thoughts on this commander. Extus is a fantastic Aristocrat-style commander that can generate a lot of value throughout the game. Again, Extus can help us generate even more value out of our instants and sorceries by getting us key creatures back. It's going to be really difficult for our opponents to stop us once we get going. With the right mix of creatures, sack outlets, benefits, and spells, we're going to be hard to stop. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.